Hi, my name is Jacie, and today we are talking about life after CIRS. Quick disclaimer here, I'm not a medical professional. I am a CIRS patient. I have read the textbook, and I do run a wellness community involved with CIRS. So I do have a lot of expertise in this area, but again, none of this should be taken as medical advice. One of the most common questions I hear about CIRS is this curable? Is this something I have to deal with for the rest of my life? Can I live a normal life if I've been diagnosed with CIRS? And to make a long video short, yes, you can live a normal life even if you are someone who is genetically predisposed to CIRS. So CIRS, or chronic inflammatory response syndrome, happens when someone who is genetically predisposed to being really bad at eliminating a biotoxin encounters that biotoxin. So while you can fix the downstream impact, you can fix the chronic inflammation, and you can rid yourself of the biotoxins, you can't necessarily turn off the genes that cause the problem in the first place. What that means practically is that if you are re-exposed, you may need to repeat a couple of the steps of the protocol for a very brief period of time to help your body eliminate the biotoxin so that you don't trigger a chronic inflammatory response. In my own CIRS journey, I have traveled throughout treatment, and now that I am almost done with the protocol, I am on the last step and just waiting for some blood work to complete that last step. I have never felt that I was unable to do anything. I've heard people describe CIRS as being like type 1 diabetes, where it's a thing that you live with, but with the right tools, you can live a normal life with it. So let's talk about some of those tools. The number one thing you can do, especially if you're traveling, is to minimize exposure. Obviously, if we are reactive to biotoxins, the less biotoxins we encounter, the healthier we can be long term. For most people with CIRS, their biotoxin is mold. The second most common is probably Lyme. So if you can avoid fields with tall grass, stuff like that, you can avoid tick bites and therefore avoid Lyme. For people who are sensitive to mold, there are a lot of things, a lot of levers you can pull in order to avoid exposure events. Number one is when you are traveling, if you have any ability to control where you will be traveling to, you can choose an easy location to travel to or a hard location to travel to. And what I mean by that is that there are going to be places that are inherently safer for people with CIRS, and there are going to be places that are inherently more difficult or have a higher risk of biotoxin exposure for people with CIRS. An example of this would be if you can be in an outside environment versus an inside environment. We know that water damaged buildings are the number one biotoxin exposure place. So if you can avoid buildings, so if you could go camping, for example, that's a good option. Another thing you can look at is the humidity in the area. So we know that water damage can occur in buildings that have humidity over 50%. Whether or not there's an active leak, if the humidity inside of the building is over 50%, there's potential for water damage to occur. So what that means is if you can go to lower humidity areas, you are less likely to expose yourself to biotoxins and less likely to have a chronic inflammatory response. That's not to say you can't go to those more difficult locations. There are a lot of tools you can use to minimize your exposure, even if you are traveling to some place that is on that scale of easy to hard, on the harder end of the spectrum. One thing you can do is call ahead and ask if the place you'll be staying has any history of water damage. Another thing you can do is ask for a pure room. Now, these rooms are supposedly set up by hotels, have more HEPA filters in them. It's not a guarantee that they change those filters. It's not a guarantee that there isn't water damage in the building, but it is a safer choice. Another thing you can do is ask how old the building is. The sweet spot is kind of 3 to 5 years old. You would think the newer the building is, the better. However, if the building is brand new, you may have VOCs that are gassing off in the room. So that would be like the smell of new paint or new carpet, which a lot of people with CIRS can be sensitive to. And then obviously the older the building is, the more potential for water damage there is, just because it's been standing there longer, going through more water exposure events. So 3 to 5 years is that sweet spot. You can also travel with an air purifier, and the ideal situation would be to have two and have them on opposite ends of the room so that the airflow is kind of crossing, and then have it where it's crossing over your bed. So the place that you're probably at the most while you're in the hotel room, I think when people are traveling, normally you're really just in the hotel room to sleep. If you can have that cross draft over your bed while you're sleeping, that may help. You can also purchase personal purifiers. They're like little gadgets that you can have as a necklace around your neck. Some people do report that they like feel them and it makes them feel anxious, or like they feel like light vibration coming from it. So if you do have that experience, that may not be super helpful. Another thing you can travel with is masks, and that may help reduce exposure as well. And then finally, travel with binders and your VIP spray if possible. These are two of the medications in the Shoemaker protocol that'll help you eliminate biotoxins as you are exposed to them. And the VIP spray will help reduce the neuroinflammatory effects of the biotoxin as you're in that environment. So if you take all of the precautions, you are super careful, and you're still exposed, one way you may be able to check to see if you have been exposed is by taking the VCS test. You can go to vcstest.com. If you've seen my other videos about the diagnostic parameters or the individual steps of the Shoemaker protocol, you may know that the VCS test is one of the tools that is used both in diagnosis and tracking how well the treatment is going over time. You can also use the VCS test to see if you've been exposed. They did some clinical trials and found that 3 days after exposure, you're very likely to fail the VCS test if you have been exposed. If you are exposed, you fail the VCS test, oh no, are you back to square one of the Shoemaker protocol? Do you have another 12 to 18 months of treatment? No. Once you have fully gone through the Shoemaker protocol, your body should have built up enough resiliency. You should have been on VIP long enough to erase most of that neuroinflammatory effect. And at that point, if you are re-exposed, it's just 2 weeks of binders, and VIP is most commonly prescribed by providers to help you totally clear that biotoxin and never trigger the chronic inflammatory downstream effect like the first time you had CIRS. All to say, if you catch yourself in exposure soon enough and you treat it soon enough, you shouldn't have a huge CIRS flare. So yes, in conclusion, you can live a normal life with CIRS. You may just have to make different decisions, carry different tools with you, and then have those different tools in your tool belt ready to use if you are exposed. I hope you enjoyed this video. Go ahead and like, comment, subscribe. I really appreciate all of your support. And if you are looking for more support on your CIRS journey, you can join us over at thecirsgroup.com. Thank you so much for watching today, and I'll see you all in the next one. Okay, bye.